Today we're going to talk about lenses for the Sony APS-C cameras. A lot of times I get questions about what lenses am I using, why am I using this lens, why am I using that lens, or should I buy this lens. So we're going to break down all the lenses that I use, and we're going to talk about when I use them, how I use them, why I use them, and I'm going to show you some sample footage of photos and videos from these lenses. First up, we're going to talk about the kit lens. The kit lens is a 16 to 50 millimeter 3.5 to 5.6, and as you can see, it's a very small lens. And I think a lot of people sleep on this lens because it's a kit lens, but this lens is very useful and it comes in very handy. You have from 16 millimeters to 50 millimeters, which is wide enough to vlog with, and you can also zoom in to take portraits or something like that with too. So that makes this lens nice and versatile, and it's stabilized, so that helps out too. So a lot of times people think that their work is not good just because they're using the kit lens, and that's definitely not the case. As with most of these lenses, they all focus pretty quick, so that's a plus. The sharpness is pretty good. It's not the sharpest, but it's definitely passable. And just like a kit lens is supposed to be, it's a very good all-around lens for very cheap. So like I said before, let's check out some photos and videos from this lens. Currently, I'm using the kit lens that I just finished talking about because the lenses on the camera was the Sigma 16mm f1.4. As you can see, this lens is much bigger than the kit lens was, and it's only 16mm, but it is a f1.4, so it opens nice and wide and lets in tons of light. And also, anytime we talk about the newer Sigma lenses, they are very sharp. These lenses are ridiculously sharp. Now, this does not have optical steady shot built in, so there's no stabilization if you're using a a6000 or a6300. So basically with this lens, if you had a full frame camera, this would be equivalent to a 24mm f1.4 for a fraction of the cost. I use this lens a lot because it is wide, but it's not overly wide. Like I said earlier, it's basically a 24mm lens, and it's very fast at f1.4, so I can pretty much use it in any condition. The autofocus is great, so I definitely say this is a must-have. The downside of this lens is that it's not that small, especially when compared to the kit lens that I'm using right now. And just like with any prime, it's only 16mm. But all in all, this is an excellent lens. I highly recommend this one. And let's check out some photos and videos from this one. Alright, now I'm back on the Sigma 16mm f1.4, and we're going to be talking about the Sigma 30mm f1.4. Now this lens is very special because you know how everyone talks about the nifty 50. Well, if you're using a crop body camera, a 50mm is not 50mm. This is a 30mm lens, so when you put it on the crop body, that brings you to about 50mm, or 45 to be exact. So this is effectively your real nifty 50. This lens is perfect for taking portraits with. This lens is perfect for street photography. Some people like doing street photography on wide lenses like the 16mm, but I like to use the Sigma 30mm because it's wide enough to capture the whole scene, and I can still get a little bit of that depth of field action going on. So this is probably the lens I use the most when it comes down to photography for sure. And it's the f1.4, so you get a nice creamy background with it. I can't say enough special things about this lens. Now, it doesn't have image stabilization or anything like that, but this lens is very sharp. This lens focuses very well. This lens has nice build quality. It's smaller than the 16mm. It's lovely. So if you want to step up your portrait game or your photography game, this is the lens. And if we compare it to the kit lens, it's about twice the size of the kit lens, so it's not that big. It balances pretty well with the camera. You can go ahead and add this to the must-have list. Next up, we have the actual 50mm. This is the Sony 50mm f1.8 with stabilization built in. This is usually the first lens that most people buy because it is the nifty 50 and it's cheap. This is usually the first lens we get a good taste of that blurry background with the f1.8 and everything like that. So I'm pretty sure this lens will run across most of our hands at some point. Now, I used to use this lens all the time for portraits until I got the 30mm. And this lens is great for portraits. This lens is very great for video, being stabilized and everything like that. But this lens is really good for those detailed shots because it's a 50mm and it's actually more of a 75-ish millimeter, something like that, being on a crop body. But I do recommend this lens. It is worth the money. And I believe it's the cheapest lens after the kit lens. Just be mindful of when you're using this lens, this is not really a 50mm. It's a lot more zoomed in than that. When I got my first full frame camera and I put a 50mm lens on that, I was like, okay, this is really 50mm. And that's why I fell in love with the Sigma 30 so much, because it gave me that full frame look of a 50mm on the crop body. Now let's check out the footage from this lens. Next up, we have the Sony 18-105 f4. This lens is a video king. Everything about this lens is made with video in mind. So you have a constant aperture of f4. So no matter if you at 18 or 105, the aperture is f4 all the way through. Another good thing about this lens is its internal zooming. So if you have this lens balanced on the gimbal, you don't want to add any weight to the front of the camera or the back of the camera because it's going to lose balance. But when you zoom in with this lens, it doesn't get any longer or shorter. So you can zoom in on the gimbal without having to rebalance it no matter what. If I try to use one of these other lenses on the gimbal, so let's say if I had the 50 on and I want to switch to a 30, I have to balance the gimbal all over again. Or if I try to put on the 16, it's not going to work. Even if I have this kit lens, it does not stay this short the entire time. When you zoom in and zoom out, the lens gets longer and shorter. So even though this lens is much bigger than all the rest, it is perfect for gimbal work. This lens gets a nice clean image. So if you're heavily into video, I definitely recommend this lens. Now I know a lot of people are going to be afraid of the f4 and they want something like the f2.8 or f1.4 or f1.8 or something like that. But f4 is a very nice spot because a lot of times if you're shooting video, you're going to be about f4, f5.6 anyway. Especially if you manual focus, because who's going to be pulling focus when you at f1.4, f1.8 trying to focus on a moving subject? Good luck with it. But if you're shooting video a lot, most likely you're going to be at about f4 anyway. Now it's not as good as some of the other lenses in low light, but that does not mean that if you have this lens on, it's going to suck in low light. Also, you got to remember that if you're filming outside in the daytime, most likely your camera is not going to be at f4 anyway. You're going to need an ND filter just to get it to f4. You're going to have to put one of these on your lenses just so you can get it to f4. Broad open daylight is not going to allow you to have your camera at f1.4 in the middle of the daytime and you're trying to get a 180-degree shutter rule on your camera. It's just not going to work. Also, keeping focus at f1.4 or 1.8 of a moving subject is not the easiest thing to do. Even on the Hollywood movies, you're not going to be shooting at f1.4 or f1.8 all the time. And that's good and fine for detail shots and stuff like that, but just realistically shooting all the time, you're not going to be at f1.8. Now, yeah, it'll be nice to have that option to shoot at f1.8 all the time because sometimes you do want to shoot at f1.8, but don't be afraid of this lens just because it's not f1.8 or f2.8 or f1.4 or something like that. F4 is definitely good enough, and this lens is a video monster. Now, if you want to shoot portraits, then I have other lenses for that. I'll throw on the 30mm or the 50mm or something like that. But for video, this is king. So what I would normally do is I would have this lens on this camera on the gimbal, and I would probably have another one of these lenses handheld so I can get any little detail shots and switch lenses or whatever like I need to. But this lens is definitely automatically the go-to lens for video. If I just need the f1.4 or the f1.8, or if I need something like that, then I'll just use one of these lenses on the other camera. But if you're in the market for a good all-around lens, this is your guy. I think this is the most expensive lens out of all these too, but look what you're getting for the price. For about $500, you're getting 18 all the way to 105mm at a constant f4, internal zooming lens with static shot, and this is a G Master lens. You can't beat it. So let's talk about what lens will work for your situation. If you're into vlogging and that's all you into, if you want to get just wide shots all the time, get the 16mm. If you want to save some money and have more diversity, then you just keep the kit lens. There's nothing wrong with the kit lens. I just switched to the kit lens earlier. You'll still be able to have those nice wide shots, and you'll be able to zoom in all the way to 50mm, which is actually like 75. So it's pretty good all-around lens. So for all those people who ask what's the best all-around lens for cheap, kit lens. That's why it's called the kit lens. Now the 30mm and the 50mm are more of the portrait lenses, and it really comes down to your personal preference with these two, because the 30mm lens is more versatile because it's a little wider but still close enough to be a nice portrait lens. But the 50mm is cheaper, so you'll be able to get it easily. Now this is a 1.4, this is a 1.8, so it's not that much difference in between the two. The 50 is smaller and it's a little lighter too, so if that's something that you care about, keep that in mind. Personally, I would go for the 30. If you can afford the 50, just save up a few more dollars, get the 30. I would choose the 30 because it is wider. This, like I said, is your actual 50mm lens. That means you'll be able to work in tighter spaces. And if you really think about it, if you have a situation and your lens is too zoomed in, let's say if you're in a very tight space and you have this 50mm lens and you realize this lens is too close, what can you do? Nothing. But if you had a 30mm lens and let's say it's not zoomed in enough, well, at least you still have whatever it is you point at in the shot. Whereas with the 50mm lens, you're just gonna be cutting it off. It's not gonna be in the shot. So you go from having no shot to a okay shot. So this lens is more safe. You can walk around with this lens, you can be in tighter places with this lens, and it's a 1.4, and it is very sharp. So now this lens is not stabilized. If you're shooting video and you're doing a lot of handheld work, this might not be the lens for you. You might want to get the 50. But Sony does have a 35mm lens that's f1.8 and it's stabilized. The reason why I got this lens is because I'm not really worried about the stabilization. This lens is a better lens. This lens is sharper. This lens goes to f4, and that was more attractive to me than having stabilization in the lens. Why? Because I have this. There's no really need for it. I have the 18-105. I don't really need a 35mm stabilized lens because I have an 18-105 stabilized lens. So that wasn't really a big selling point to me. That's why I went with the Sigma version and not the Sony version. Another honorable mention would be the Sony 10-18 f4. That lens is very wide and it's stabilized. So I guess that would be more like the ultimate vlogging lens for this camera. That lens would be great for like landscape pictures and videos or real estate videos and pictures and stuff like that. But I personally don't have a need for a 10-18. Also, that lens costs almost twice as much as any of these lenses we just talked about. So it's not that much value to me. But if you need a really wide lens, you have the 10-18mm Sony f4. And as I've said before, that you have the 18-105, that is definitely for you videographers. Now you can take pictures with the lens, nothing's wrong with the pictures on this lens or anything like that. But that lens is definitely built for video. With all that said, I've shown you pictures from all of these lenses. I've shown you video from all of these lenses. All of these lenses are capable of doing both. It just definitely comes down to what you're looking for and what fits into what you need. So like if you're just constantly shooting in dark situations like club events or concerts or something like that, then you're gonna want a faster lens. You're gonna want a wide lens most likely. So the 16mm might be good for you, or the 30mm. But if you're never in a situation where you need an aperture that wide, then the kit lens probably take care of you. If you never really shoot portraits and all you do is video, then you got the 18-105, and that's pretty much gonna cover your entire range. Also, Sigma just announced a 56mm f1.4 for this camera, and that would technically be your 85mm 1.4 if it was a full frame camera. So I would definitely be getting that lens when it finally releases. That will completely replace my 50mm because it's more of a true 85mm, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna be much sharper than this lens, being a Sigma, and it's f1.4. So these lenses are primarily gonna be video for me. These are good like B-cam lenses or something like that. So these lenses are definitely gonna be primarily video for me, and the Sigma is gonna be my portrait lens. That will complete the lineup of the 16mm, the 30mm, and the 56mm. If you have any questions about any lens I just talked about, or any lens that I didn't talk about that you might be considering, just leave a comment down below and I will hang out down there and talk to you guys. I hope this video was helpful, so please leave me a thumbs up, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, and I will see you guys next time.